It's time to talk about the Wheel of Time. And especially after this episode, I'm really having to sit here and remind myself. I think the point of me doing these videos, because they're a little bit outside of the norm of what I usually do on this channel, even though, it's my channel, so I can talk about whatever I want. Therefore, these videos are, at the end of the day, mostly so I can vent my own thoughts, feelings, and opinions somewhere, even if it just feels like I'm screaming them into the void. But I don't really have anyone in real life who has read the books that I can talk / vent / rant to. Boy, was I particularly in my feels while watching this episode, episode 7, as I'm sure a lot of you book readers and non-alike. Well, I have been on board with a lot of the changes that they've made in the show so far, and even non-canonical deaths like we've seen this season with people like Natty Coffin and even Uno, my beloved Uno, who we lost too soon. If I can see why it's needed, both for plot development reasons, character development reasons, but right now it's just, even though part of me can understand why it happened, it's just hard for me personally to stand behind the justifications for killing off Loyal, especially because he is one of people's favorite characters, I think, in all of the book fandom. So I feel like Rafe may have went a step too far with this one, and I feel like he owes book fans in particular a personal apology. Parts of this episode, while I did really like it and I thought overall it was very well executed, there were little things like that and Alana and Perrin. There was just a lot of things that kind of worried me because they were giving, we don't know if we're getting another season, so let's just tie some of these things up in a neat little bow now, in case we're not coming back to pick them up later. Which they really had better, because from all that I've seen on social media, season 3 is getting the highest ratings of the show so far. And I think that's justified because it's been one of the most stellar and standout seasons so far. So they had better give it a season 4, because, like it or not, Amazon, this is your next Game of Thrones. That is the level of execution that we are getting here. Up to and including, it seems, being willing to kill our darlings. Okay, I'm back. I had to go rewatch the behind the scenes after this episode really quick because I wanted to make a note of what Rafe Judkins' justification was for why they killed off Loyal, and I was seeing a lot of this further justification in an article I read, a couple articles that I read. I think one was from Screen Rant and one was from Entertainment Weekly, so I'll try to leave links to those down below, where they were interviews with Marcus talking about just the time and the labor intensiveness and difficulty of getting into all of those prosthetics to play Loyal every day. And I understand that definitely takes a toll, and that's a lot to have to work around. And I'm the first one to admit that Loyal becomes less than a background character after this point, but I don't know. This point in the show was where I kind of had a hard time getting behind the show's changes from the books, because it was starting to feel too much like they're having to course correct and write their way out of their own changes and things that are consequences of their own changes in the show, and that's what's starting to bother me. Because in the behind the scenes after this episode, Rafe says that part of the reason they made the change was, Loyal just doesn't have a whole lot to do after this point, so just for keeping things less complicated and not having too many characters just floating around in the background, it kind of made sense to get rid of him. But then just let him go home. Just let him go home to the setting. They said, the reason they had him make this self-sacrifice at the end was that they wanted us slash Perrin to see that there is a cost of battle and have Perrin go through a real loss at the end of this season. Okay, so have the White Cloak slash Trollocs kill off his family like they did in the book. And then that would also add further to the whole juxtaposition of Perrin may or may not have done something bad, but the White Cloaks also did bad things by hunting down his family and these other innocent villagers, okay? This had better just be a fucked up way of getting everyone to demand a season 4 so that they can bring Loyal back, right? All I can think is that if other book readers already did not like the show for making outrageous changes, then they're really not on board now. And I almost had to rage quit after this point, but okay, I'm gonna try to. Since this episode did focus solely on the Two Rivers and the battle for the Two Rivers plotline, and because I am so divided on things that I liked versus really disliked in this episode, I'm just gonna go and split it between things that I liked versus things that I disliked. So let's get into it. Likes. Marcus's performance as Perrin in this episode. 11 out of 10, standing right up there with Yosha as far as performance and growth is concerned. I had to make note that even my husband noticed and made a comment on him and his portrayal and his acting in this episode, giving Ragnar Lothbrok in Viking / Travis Fimmel level of acting from him, because I thought, oh, maybe that's just because maybe it was just his natural accent coming through, but no, he sounded completely different in the interview, not in character. So yeah, I think that was a choice maybe on his part, but that was the caliber of acting that he's giving in this episode, and even my husband made a note of that. Shout out and kudos to him for growing a lot as an actor since season 1 and really stepping into the role of Perrin in particular. I mean, admittedly, in the first couple seasons, Perrin and his character didn't really have a whole lot going on or a whole lot to work with. Not only is Perrin in general just a guy who's very quiet, keeps to himself, very much in his head, and thinks a lot before he speaks or acts. And then on top of that, show Perrin was just in his grief still in the first couple seasons and very turned in on himself because of that. I just didn't notice as much nuance then in the early seasons as I do now. And the depth of character with Perrin, I think, is just really there now and coming through in this season and in this episode. All I can say with that is 3 cheers for Lord Golden Eyes. Loved to see that, and my heart really swelled seeing them raise the Wolf's Head banner. Just give me more Wolf Brother Perrin, please. I loved Faye's comment when they were raising the banner to Perrin. I know, you love it. Dislikes. Number 1 dislike, as I've said, killing off Loyal. He better have just fallen onto another platform right beneath that one and be coming out of another waygate later, right? You did not just condemn my boy to fall into an endless void forever like that. Like I said, I know he's just less than a background character after this point, but then just let him go home. You made a point of saying the longing and he needs to go home to the setting, and that Perrin wanted him to just go home after this. So just let him go home. In the books, him and Bane and Chiad and Gaul. So first off, just not only justice for Gaul, but now justice for Brother Book. On top of that, they all went off on this side quest and just used that Avendosora leaf to permanently close the Waygate so no one could come through it. But again, we have the show here having to write themselves out of changes that they made because they made it in the show that people could use channeling to open the Waygates, which you can't do in the books. I think that's why they had to permanently destroy it, because otherwise anyone who could channel could just come along and reopen it again. So they're having to write their way out of a change that they made. Likes. Daisy Congar in this episode. Not only is she the wisdom now, but she went from wisdom to boss bitch channeler in this episode. So I liked to see that. I loved that she went from saying that she would only learn to channel if she didn't have to stop drinking, but one sip of cider was all it takes for her to just put down the drink, because nothing compares to the one power. Dislikes, Daisy Congar. Why you gotta also kill off not only Loyal, but arguably the most memorable background Emmons Fielders thus far? Especially after you went out of your way to make me like her like that? And now who's gonna be the wisdom for Emmons Field? Because we lost her, and in Nynaeve's accepted test, the only other alternative candidate we saw was Natty Cawthon. Likes the Battle of the Two Rivers, I thought was really well shot, well executed, great cinematography, great fight choreography. Loved getting to see the Two Rivers longbows in action because that's what they're known for. 11 out of 10 for dual wielding Perrin. I liked getting to see him not only forging his axe, his dream axe, like he was in the dream that we saw Egwene spying on earlier, but yeah, getting to see him dual wielding it with the hammer to go absolute berserker mode. I did like seeing Bornhold actually show up to help here, and not only that, but putting aside his feelings for Perrin and actually fighting back to back and alongside him for the Two Rivers. I thought it was interesting to see Padan Fain show up as a literal Trojan horse here, but I felt like in the dislikes column, we needed to see that more develop and needed more time to see him interacting with the White Cloak camps. I wanted to see him with the White Cloaks and infiltrating the camp more. I wanted to see where Perrin maybe found that armor and got it from in this backwater village. But in the likes column, I liked to see the women's circle winning and using these same tactics, group tactics that they used to take down Trollocs, as we did all the way back in season 1, episode 1, with the original Trolloc attack. And that being said, I also did like to finally see more Trollocs in the show. I'm kind of on the fence here because I put it in the dislike category that we sadly didn't get to see characters like Tam Althor here, because I just really liked the way he was cast and portrayed in season 1. So I did miss seeing Tam here. But in the likes column, I had to admit that having Tam Althor there and having that actor there, who aside from Moraine is probably one of the other big name, well-known actors that they've had thus far on the show, having him present there not only would have pulled focus, I think, away from Perrin being the focus and the main character of this episode, but also pulled focus away from him being the go-to leader and main character, because Tam also had military experience, so if he was there, people might have been less likely to turn to Perrin. I think it just would have overall pulled focus away from Perrin as the main character of the episode, so I understand why he maybe needed to be Sir not appearing in this film. In the likes column for Battle of Two Rivers, I also really loved seeing more of not just Fael, but Perrin and Fael. I think they've done a really good job with the limited time to develop their relationship, and I like in the behind-the-scenes interviews and articles that we've had with Marcus Rutherford, the way that he understands their relationship dynamics and how it needs to play out on screen, and that he apparently did have somewhat of a say in Fael's casting to find someone that really not only had that relationship dynamic of being the yin to his yang, but also being able to choose someone that really had that chemistry. So I think they did a good job with that, and it played out really well. I liked the scene before the battle where she was telling him, "Oh, are you scared? Don't be scared." And then he asks her if she's scared. She says, "Of course I'm not scared. I'm not a big baby." Teasing him, but also pushing him to really step up and step into that leadership role and lead his people, because she sees that potential in him. And I loved seeing her tiny but fierce fighting skills. As a fellow short girly, I know for a fact that if I ever did have to fight someone, I would be fighting dirty like that. I would be jumping on people's backs like a little monkey and stabbing them, because that's what you gotta do. Use your height or lack of height to your advantage. So I really like to see that, and her not only watching his back, but him being able to stand aside and not be as protective of her and let her guard his back like that and acknowledge her skills. In the dislike category for the battle, Alana's plot armor I felt like was just really thick in this episode, especially after she got Boromir'd last time and already had to come back from that near death. Now she got speared again. Admittedly, I was going to be mad if they had spent all of this extra time building up her character to then just kill her off abruptly here, but that was not just an arrow she got through the midsection this time. That was like a full-on ballista bolt, okay? Remind me once again at the season finale to insert the shank counter for the season thus far of people just being stabbed or shanked and coming back from it, because it's a lot, especially just this season. Likes. I liked Bane and Chiad just overall in this episode, getting to see more of them and their characters, but especially them trying to use Maiden's Kiss to pull the Uno reverse card on Loyal when he tried to use Maiden's Kiss to alleviate them of their toll. But yeah, definitely liked to see them and Loyal poning Trollocs and Dark Friends in this episode. And speaking of poning, I liked to see the Coffin Girls using more of their channeling abilities, and a link with Alana. I said something in my last breakdown video about Alana possibly being taken out of commission for the battle itself somehow, because otherwise, as we saw with the initial onset of the battle, she was just going to win it single-handedly. I do have to hand it to her for channeling some ice knife rain. That was really sick. I also did really like seeing the Maxim Alana banter continuing in this episode, and that since I had to call them out in the last one as like, oh, the girls are fighting, the continuation of that energy, especially with her literally calling him a bitch when he ate that fig in front of her. But I did like to also see Maxim stepping up in this episode to take charge of the battlefront and even staying with the Emmons fielders when shit was getting real and going down. Even when he also felt Alana going down and was probably feeling the pull to have to go to her, he stayed on the front lines because he knew that what she would have wanted him to do and what was needed was for him to stay with the Two Rivers full and hold the line. And even though this whole time, this whole season, what he's wanted to do, arguably, is run away and leave, and up until this point, he really has not given a single shit about the Two Rivers or any of the people there. But he finally stepped up and stayed with them and helped them out. Speaking of stepping up and helping out when shit gets real, I did finally like to see the book storyline of Aram and the Tinkers play out in this episode. If you've seen, my Shadow Rising breakdown or any predictions related to that, we knew the Tinkers were going to come back at some point before or during the battle for the two rivers as they do in the book. So I was glad to finally see that come to fruition, and not just that, but see Aram reappear and his storyline finally come to fruition. So I hope that we'll get to see more of that play out. Arguably, and I mean, I'm not going to put this fully in the dislike category because it did play out in a different way in the show compared to the books. In the books, it happened sooner. Aram, as we have seen, as soon as his appearance in season 1, was kind of not as fully committed to the way of the leaf as his elders. I was like, what word? I was like, not predecessors, but yeah, he's not as fully committed to the way of the leaf as his elders. And so now, in the lead up to the battle, we see him being even more on the fence about nonviolence in the face of overt violence and threats to one's own life. So he decides to pick up a sword and defend the two rivers and defend himself and defend his people before the battle even starts. And here he kind of does it under duress, and not just to save his own life, but to defend the life of a literal newborn child. I'm still glad we got to see his storyline play out in one way or another, because with all the things that they've had to cut so far and side characters they've had to cut so far, they arguably could have just left him on cutting room floor entirely. Glad we got to see him choosing to play out his book storyline of leaving the Tinker pathway and leaving behind the way of the leaf and choosing to pick up a weapon, and not just any weapon, but a sword, like arguably the most verboten weapon that a Tinker could pick up. And that also is why the Aiel scorn them so much and choose to only use spears, is because there's kind of this loophole / gray area where weapons are concerned, and where Perrin's big dilemma, the hammer or the axe, is concerned. Some of these things can arguably said to also be used as tools, such as knives, axes, and spears. As we saw Lewin say in the flashback, a spear can at least put food in the pots, if nothing else, and an axe can be used for other things besides killing. A sword, it's not really made or used for anything else besides killing. That's its purpose. So I'm wondering if we'll still see him get his full story arc playing out, where he kind of tries to apprentice himself or swear himself to Perrin in a way, or takes oaths to him. But since Perrin is so reluctant to step into any of those roles and feels like he doesn't want to just lead people into danger or lead people to their death, he doesn't really mentor Aram the way that maybe he should. And he's got his own reasons for doing that. He's dealing with a lot of his own baggage. But because of that, Aram just kind of left to his own devices and left to kind of figure it out on his own, for better or sadly worse in the long run. Thankfully, Gwen's mom decides to take him under her wing a little bit, offer him a job as the new town blacksmith. I'm wondering if hopefully we get Perrin's plotline resolved sooner rather than the later that it happens in the books. Maybe we'll see the people of the two rivers, or Fael and Aram in particular, along with Bane and Chiad, trying to go rescue him. Curious to see where they'll take that. Speaking of Perrin's story arc, in the dislikes column, I didn't really like seeing Padan Fain get let off the hook by Perrin here, when he's a literal dark friend whose only mission is to wipe the two rivers off the map, as he stated clearly here. Like, that's his sole objective, is to target the two rivers. And his orders, as he said, are coming from the Dark One. I get that they said that they wanted to see Perrin win with non-violence, and it's like, okay, yeah, maybe that worked for now, but Fane's still under those orders, and so how long before he just comes back again? Perrin giving himself up, I feel like, is another show having to write its way out of changes that they themselves made from the books, especially with Perrin, because in the books, He doesn't actually murder a white cloak. They just think he does, and he's being wrongfully accused of murder and being a dark friend. So he has a little bit more wiggle room to wiggle his way out of going with them at the end, especially because in the books the white cloaks don't show up to help, so Perrin has even more justification for not holding up his end of the deal and going with them, because they didn't hold up their end of the deal. Whereas here in the show, Perrin did actually murder someone, and the white cloaks did show up to help, so he kind of has no choice but to do the right thing and go with them. I mean, I get why he did it, but I didn't like to see literally nobody in the Two Rivers trying to even stand up for him, even a little bit. In the likes column, I do have to say that I would be okay with them speed running Perrin's arc, especially compared to the books where we don't get the resolution of this White Cloaks plotline until book 13 of like 14, so damn near not till the end of the entire series. So I'm gonna be okay if we move up his trial and get that whole thing out of the way sooner rather than later. I also don't mind seeing Eminvalda go now, because he doesn't really have much to do other than lurk in the background after this point and literally like be even more nasty than he is now, if that's even possible. So yeah, I'm totally okay with him going now, especially going out the way he did, getting fried extra crispy by the Coffin Sisters as karma for what he did to their mom and all those other Aes Sedai. I don't want or need his future plot lines with Morghese or any of the Morghese plot lines, to be honest. So I'm okay with that. But yeah, as far as dislikes go, it's again, I feel like the show having to write themselves out of their own changes with Perrin. In that behind the scenes interview with Rafe, he said that they wanted to show that actions have consequences, but I'm just like, bro, you literally gave him those actions when he didn't have them in the books. He was just being targeted unfairly. So yeah, I guess on that note, I'm really curious to see how they're gonna write their way out of this one. I'm curious to see if we're gonna see the plot line play out of Galad, Elaine's older brother, joining the White Cloaks like he does in the books, and then later being the one to sit as judge for Perrin's trial. So yeah, I won't be mad if we bring that into play and resolve that storyline sooner rather than later. And I think it would be an interesting turn and flip-flop from Perrin's storylines in future novels, where he has to go rescue Fael from being captured. I think it would be fun to see her rescue him from being captured. I was really torn after this one. I'm still really in my feels about Loyal, if I'm being honest. They may have gone too far with that one. They may have crossed the line a little bit. So yeah. Let me know how you feel as either a book reader or especially as a non-book reader. I understand why you may not have been as attached to Loyal as a book reader would. And even as a book reader, I do understand that he is arguably less than even a background character after this point. So why not just send him off now, send him off with a bang? But yeah, not like this. And other than that, all I can say is, hashtag justice for Brother Book, hashtag Tyshawn Manetheren. I did, in the likes column, really love seeing the reprise of the Song of Manetheren come back in this episode. If you saw my season 1 rewatch and breakdown videos, I did really like the Song of Manetheren that we got as a little folk song in season 1, and I was really surprised yet pleased to see it make a reappearance here in such an impactful way. I was kind of waiting to see what Perrin's big inspirational speech was gonna be, but instead he just dropped that song on us, and having everyone join in just literally gave me chills. I have to give them one in the likes column for that one. I'm really divided about some of the choices in this episode, so let me know what you guys think of it. Loyal, we lost you too soon. In my head, you made it out of another waygate and just decided to go home to your steading, and you are just riding peacefully there. Until next time, stay classy, watchers.